John was a simple man, a carpenter whose greatest masterpiece wasn't a piece of furniture, but his son Leo. Leo was his whole world, a bright, kind-hearted boy, with a laugh that could chase away the darkest clouds. Their life was a quiet symphony of sawdust, school runs, and shared dreams whispered under the stars. John was teaching Leo the craft, the scent of pine and patience filling their small workshop. He dreamt of the day they'd be partners, their names etched side by side on a sign, Parker and Son. But one rain-slicked evening, that symphony was silenced. A reckless driver, a man named Marcus Thorne, tore through a red light, the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, and then, a deafening silence. John was left with nothing but a void where his son's laughter used to be. The world, once vibrant, was now a monochrome of grief. Thorne, a man insulated by wealth and connections, walked away with a slap on the wrist. A fine, a temporary license suspension, a pittance for a life so precious. For the justice system, the case was closed. For John, the real trial had just begun. Night after night, John sat in Leo's empty room, the silence screaming louder than any crowd. He saw Thorne in the news, smiling at galas, living a life of careless luxury, a life he had stolen from his son. The legal system had failed him. Justice had turned a blind eye. A cold, hard resolve began to form in the furnace of his heartbreak. If the system wouldn't hold Thorne accountable, he wouldn't seek violence that wasn't his way. His revenge would be a masterpiece of patience and precision, built with the same care he once used to build Leo's first crib. John sold his workshop, his home, everything that tied him to his old life. He disappeared, melting into the city's anonymous crowds. He spent months, then years, meticulously studying Marcus Thorne. He learned his habits, his businesses, his investments, his secrets. He learned that Thorne's entire empire, his pride and joy, was built on a foundation of shady deals and hidden vulnerabilities. It was a house of cards, beautiful on the outside, but fragile. And John the carpenter knew exactly where to apply the pressure. He started small, a whisper campaign here, an anonymous tip to a financial journalist there. He used his life savings to make strategic, almost invisible moves in the stock market, subtly betting against Thorne's ventures. He became a ghost in the machine, a digital phantom chipping away at the foundations of Thorne's world. To Thorne, it was just a string of bad luck, a deal that fell through, a stock that mysteriously plummeted, a trusted associate suddenly investigated for old misdeeds. He was too arrogant to see the pattern, too self-absorbed to notice the architect behind his slow-motion collapse. Years passed. John's hair turned gray, and lines of sorrow and determination were etched on his face. He lived a Spartan life, fueled by black coffee and a single, burning purpose. He never allowed himself to hate Thorne. Hate was a fire that would consume him too. This was about balance, it was about justice. It was a tribute to Leo, a final, silent conversation with his son, proving that his life had meant something, that it wouldn't be forgotten. The final act was a work of art. John had discovered Thorne's biggest secret, a massive illegal land deal that was the cornerstone of his future plans. Thorne had bribed officials, forged documents, and ruined a small community to acquire the land. John gathered every piece of evidence, bank transfers, recorded conversations, sworn affidavits from those Thorne had wronged. He compiled it all into an irrefutable dossier. He didn't leak it to the press. That would be too quick, too impersonal. On the 10th anniversary of Leo's passing, Thorne was hosting a lavish charity gala, a grand display of his public generosity. As he stood on stage, basking in the applause, the large screens behind him, meant to display a slideshow of his philanthropy, flickered. Suddenly they weren't showing pictures of smiling children, they were displaying bank statements, forged signatures, a map of the stolen land. Then audio began to play, Thorne's own voice, caught on tape, boasting about his deception. Panic erupted. The applause died, replaced by gasps and furious whispers. Thorne's face went pale, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him in real time. His phone began to buzz incessantly with calls from his lawyers, his investors, and the authorities who were already on their way. He was ruined, not by a market crash or a rival, but by an invisible, relentless force. From a small rented apartment across the city, John watched the newsfeed on his laptop. He saw the flashing lights of police cars surrounding the venue. He saw Marcus Thorne, the untouchable man, being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and utter defeat. John felt no joy, no triumph, just a quiet, profound sense of release, a finality. He closed the laptop. He walked over to a small wooden box on his desk. He opened it and took out a half-finished carving of a small bird, the last thing he and Leo had worked on together. He picked up his old carving knife, its wooden handle smooth from years of use. As the first rays of dawn touched the city, John began to carve again. He wasn't building a monument of revenge anymore. He was finishing a memory. He was finally, after a decade in the darkness, ready to build a life for himself again, a quiet life, filled with the scent of pine and the enduring love for a son whose memory he had honored. Justice had been served. The carpenter could finally rest. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.